This is the Ben Shapiro Show. This show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. It's time to stand up to big tech. Protect your data at expressvpn.com/Ben. So the book burning continues anew. It continues each and every day. Honestly, this story is in some ways even scarier than the story about the Dr. Seuss estate pulling 6 of his books, including classics like and I Saw It on Mulberry Street and If I Ran the Zoo. When they pull those books, that is terrible and awful, and it is self-censorship of an extraordinary order. It is a willingness to cave in the face of a woke, censorious, authoritarian left. It degrades our culture. It degrades our freedoms. It is bad. Okay, I don't know when it became a controversial thing to say that self-censorship of classic children's literature is bad, but it's bad. But it's now gone even further than this. eBay is now taking down your ability to even list these books. So you said to yourself, listen, I had an extra copy If I Ran the Zoo. And now those things are selling for like $650 because when you make things samizdat, when you ban material like they did in the Soviet Union, it turns out that people are going to try and get a hold of the material. When that happens, the prices skyrocket. So a lot of people went to eBay to sell this stuff. Now eBay has decided that they are going to remove the Dr. Seuss books. You cannot, as a third party, sell these Dr. Seuss books. Now eBay is another one of these neutral service providers, right? eBay is supposed to be, like Amazon was supposed to be, a neutral service provider, right? They don't have an editorial point of view. And in fact, if you looked at eBay yesterday, you could still buy copies of Protocols of the Elders of Zion. You could buy, which is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory first created in Tsarist Russia. You could still buy copies of Mein Kampf. Those were available at decent prices. You couldn't buy copies, however, if I Ran the Zoo. According to Newsweek, following Dr. Seuss Enterprises' recent decision to discontinue publishing and licensing on 6 of the famous children's authors' books because of problematic content, demand for the titles in question spiked. But even though the resale market for the controversial Seuss books has been strong, eBay has started to remove listings for the titles, citing its policy on offensive material. This writer actually has access to a worn copy of one of the out-of-print books, and to think that I Saw It on Mulberry Street, and listed it on eBay late Tuesday afternoon. On Thursday morning, this writer received an email from eBay saying the listing was removed for violating an offensive material policy. The automated email said, quote, listings that promote or glorify hatred, violence, or discrimination aren't allowed. Dr. Seuss Enterprises has stopped publication of this book due to its negative portrayal of some ethnicities. As a courtesy, we have ended your item and refunded your selling fees. And as long as you do not relist the item, there will be no negative impact to your account. So in other words, they're going to punish you for having listed a book you did not write and that you do not agree is a racist book. They're going to punish you if you refuse to abide by their strictures. So that now eBay is in on the act. In its email on Thursday, eBay included the fine print of its policy. One portion of the message, which gives an overview of the policy, reads, quote, items including figurines, cartoons, housewares, historical advertisements, and gollywogs with racist, anti-Semitic, or otherwise demeaning portrayals, for example, through caricatures or other exaggerated features. An eBay spokesperson clarified the company's position further. At eBay, we have a strict policy against hate and discrimination to ensure our platform remains a safe, trusted, and inclusive environment for our global community of buyers and sellers. Please see our offensive policies material. We're currently sweeping our marketplace to remove those items. In absolute absurdity. So I guess that Huck Finn is next. Can't list your secondhand copy of Huck Finn. Because, I mean, Huck Finn has the N-word in it. It does. Just a reality. And as we know from the New York Times, anything that has the N-word in it is bad. Unless it's written by Nicole Hannah-Jones, in which case it is good. So eBay has now removed your ability to even sell secondhand Dr. Seuss books. When neutral platforms, neutral service providers become the tools of the woke in their censorious attempts to remove and erase history, and remove and erase, by the way, non-offensive children's books, there's not a single human being who, until the woke got a hold of it, ever looked at If I Ran the Zoo and said, wow, this is so brutally offensive, I can't believe it. Or Mulberry Street, which is even less controversial. It's amazing. By the way, what is on the NEA reading list? According to Jared Stepman over at the Daily Signal, what's on the NEA reading list? Well, if you're a kid, you can't read. And to think that I Saw It on Mulberry Street, which I read to my kids yesterday. I did it just to show them. I felt the sort of thrill of disregard for the woke when I read Mulberry Street. This is how stupid everything has become. What books does the NEA recommend you read? You can't read to your kids about an imaginary parade in which a Chinese person carries chopsticks. You cannot read that. That is terribly bad. But you should, and it is recommended by the NEA, the National Education Association, that you read to your children, Julian is a Mermaid, about a little boy who sees women dressed as mermaids and wants to dress like them. Also, The Prince and the Dressmaker, about a prince who secretly wears dresses at night. They recommend you read this. Not you're allowed to. They recommend it. It is recommended by the NEA. There's also Americanized Rebel Without a Green Card, about an illegal immigrant from Iran. There's also We Are Here to Stay, Voices of Undocumented Young Adults, also about illegal immigration. There is also Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You. Oh, it is from Ibram X. Kendi. So overt, bizarre racist Ibram X. Kendi, that guy, they recommend his books. By the way, speaking of Ibram X. Kendi, Ibram X. Kendi is such an unbelievable, ridiculous, backwards racist that he actually tweeted this out yesterday. And this is the Kafka move right here. The heartbeat of racism is denial. And too often, the more powerful the racism, the more powerful the denial. The heartbeat of racism is actually hatred and bigotry. But he doesn't care about hatred and bigotry. He cares about being able to label anyone he wants racist. So if you deny that you are a racist, this makes you a racist. This is why it's called a Kafka move. Right? Because like Franz Kafka in The Trial, you are guilty if you say that you are innocent, and you are guilty if you say that you are guilty. If you are a witch, then you will absolutely sink to the bottom of the river. Or then you will absolutely float if you're a witch. If you're a witch, you will float. And if you are not a witch, you will sink. That's how we'll find out whether you're a witch or not. So that guy wrote a crappy children's book, and we are going to use that as the basis for teaching children. We're going to actively teach children about racial essentialism, but if they see a cartoon picture of Asian people carrying a mythical animal in a book about a child running a zoo, then obviously that is going to create all sorts of racist sentiment. Amazing stuff. Really solid stuff here from our culture. Our culture is doing a great job. And it's going to extend to movies now. Long piece in The Hollywood Reporter by Rebecca Keegan today. Racist, sexist, classic? How Hollywood is dealing with its problematic content. As streamers build out their lucrative libraries, they're experimenting with label warnings, context panels, and even purges. These are valuable properties you cannot just disregard. You want to keep them, but you have to make sure they don't damage the brand, they say. Every month, Disney convenes an eclectic group of advisors via video conference to tell the media conglomerate what it and the many entertainment companies it has acquired over its nearly 100-year history have gotten wrong. Every single month, they're doing these woke struggle sessions. It's a long list. Song of the South, Jar Jar Binks. I mean, Jar Jar Binks is wrong, but I don't know why. Why is Jar Jar problematic? I mean, I understand that he's a terrible character, but we're canceling Jar Jar now? Misa! I mean, first of all, and I will say that anybody who caps Jar Jar is a hero to me, but if the woke cap Jar Jar, that seems like they're on the dark side. That episode of The Muppet Show where Johnny Cash sings a duet with Miss Piggy in front of a Confederate flag. Yeah, you know how many people were radicalized by that? You know how many people became white supremacists because they saw Johnny Cash sing a duet with Miss Piggy in front of a Confederate flag? So many people joined the KKK because of that. We've had some raw conversation on these Zooms, says Gil Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association, who sits on Disney's advisory council alongside representatives from groups like the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment and the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media, as well as representatives from various departments at Disney, including programming, public policy, diversity, and inclusion. Disney asks Robertson and his colleagues to watch content that may contain stereotypes or insensitive imagery and offer their perspectives. See, here's the thing. You are now outsourcing your wokeness to these groups. These groups only survive by finding things to be offended by. You know what would happen to these groups if there were nothing offensive? Or if they actually reported the truth, which is that they are not offended by any of this stuff? You know what would happen to them? No one would need them. They're not going to unwoke themselves out of a job. When Disney hands over power to all of these interest groups, what they are doing is saying to them, you now have an incentive to call things racist so that we have to keep coming back to you for our latest re-up. When you are running a business, HR issues can absolutely kill you. Wrongful termination suits, minimum wage requirements, labor regulations, and HR manager salaries aren't cheap. An average of $70,000 a year. Bambee, spelled B-A-M-B-E-E, was created specifically for small business. You can get a dedicated HR manager, craft HR policy, and maintain your compliance all for just $99 a month. With Bambee, you can change HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength. Your dedicated HR manager is available by phone, email, or real-time chat. From onboarding to terminations, they customize your policies to fit your business and help you manage your employees day-to-day, all for just $99 a month. Month to month, no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. You didn't start your business because you wanted to spend time on HR compliance. Let Bambee help get your free HR audit today. Go to Bambi.com/Ben right now. Schedule that free HR audit. That is Bambi.com/Ben, spelled BAM to the BEE.com/Ben, Bambi.com/Ben. Go check them out right now. You don't want HR to become your biggest headache, as opposed to just a thing that you need to get taken care of. Head on over to Bambi.com/Ben right now. Schedule that free HR audit. Get started and protect your business today. So now they're trying to reframe classic films on TCM. TCM host Ben Mankiewicz says, nobody's canceling these movies. Our job is not to get up and say, here's a movie you should feel guilty about for liking, but to pretend the racism in it is not painful and acute. No, I don't want to shy away from that. This was inevitable and welcomed and overdue. Or we could, just let people make their own decisions about things. I know, terrible, terrible idea. So Tropic Thunder, I guess, is bad. It's offensive, Tropic Thunder now. Robert Downey Jr. got a Best Supporting Actor nomination for that, by the way. Older shows and movies are still big business, says The Hollywood Reporter. On Disney Plus, nearly 80% of the TV demand was for these streaming services' licensed and library shows. Only about 20% was for original shows like The Mandalorian, which also have to be wiped clean, by the way, of anyone who thinks differently, as we learned about Gina Carano. In 2019, Miramax's 700 film library was valued at $750 million. The libraries at Disney and Warner Media are multi-billion-dollar assets. But the need for studios to reckon with their racist histories took on a new urgency last summer as Black Lives Matter protests were unfolding. No, they didn't actually. They seriously did not. Nobody cared about this. Nobody was clamoring for it. You just decided to do it preemptively because the woke control your companies. And because you know that the woke are loud and squeaky and they bother you. So now they're going to contextualize everything, or maybe even remove it. Drawing attention to problems in their own archives does carry risk for studios. Kermit canceled, asked a headline on the conservative website The Daily Wire when Disney rolled out disclaimers on 18 episodes of The Muppet Show. When the host of Fox and Friends asked Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton about disclaimers on February 24th, the lawmaker brought up the studio's relationship with China. Yeah, that is correct. These types of cancel culture critiques have not deterred the studios. Now, of course they haven't. Why would they? Because here's the thing. They have a monopoly on the entertainment properties. They can always just remove it. And that's what eventually will happen. If you think that the content warnings are going to be enough, they won't. Eventually, the woke are going to demand that these things just go away permanently because they're harmful. And no matter how many times you warn people about context, trigger warnings aren't enough. They have to be removed. And here's the thing. There is no end to it. Like, no end to it. Michael Strahan, good example. And no matter how much you apologize, it will never be enough. Disney can put the context warnings. TCM can do this new contextualizing series. They can do all that stuff. It won't make one iota of difference because in the end, there is no end. Right? So here's the thing about religion. Religion, when you repent before God, God accepts it. The woke, when you repent before the woke, they murder you. They kill your career. They destroy your life. Chris Harrison, who's the host of The Bachelor, or was, and now has been deemed unfit to be the host of a silly dating show because he had the temerity to suggest that a woman ought to be given grace for going to an antebellum-themed party in 2018 after her black boyfriend on the show suggested she be given grace. He's been canceled. He went on Good Morning America, and he apologized for himself. He said that he was insufficiently sensitive and all this. This created the impetus for Michael Strahan to now declare that he was not sufficiently sincere. His sincerity was not good enough, and so he must remain canceled. Here's Michael Strahan.
His apology is his apology, but it felt like it got nothing more than a surface response on any of this. And obviously, he's the man who wants to clearly stay on the show, but only time will tell if there is any meaning behind his words.
Only time will tell. But there's no way for him to prove it because you're not going to let him back on the show because you don't want him back on the show. Our culture has shown its neck to the woke, and the woke are just cutting it off. I mean, that is all that is happening here. So how do you fight back against it? Well, first of all, make your voices heard. Make it clear to Disney that if they begin to cancel shows that you like, you're not going to take your money there. Find alternatives. Create new projects. And that's what we're doing here at Daily Wire, and we need your help. This is why I recommended to everybody get a membership at Daily Wire. We are pushing into the culture war because culture is upstream of politics. But recognize that what the left does right now, their greatest trick, is that they will take a seminal piece of literature like Dr. Seuss, they'll cancel it, and then they'll say, why are you even paying attention? You ought to be paying attention because these are indicators of a culture that is in complete collapse. The only way to shore it up is to stand up for the culture, even stuff you disagree with. Alrighty, in just a second, we're going to get into what is clearly the most insane story of the day. I mean, you're not going to believe this one. It really is quite crazy. First, let us talk about your most valuable asset. Clearly, your most valuable asset is your home title. That's true for pretty much everybody. Now, nobody's going to steal your home because they can't literally pick up your home. What they can do, however, is hack into your home title records, and then they can forge a quitclaim deed. They can say you sold your home to them, and then they can just start taking out debt against your house. And you're not going to find out about that until the bills start arriving. Well, insurance doesn't cover you for this sort of stuff. Neither do common identity theft programs. That's why I protect my own home with Home Title Lock. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with my home title, they help shut it down absolutely cold. Head on over to HometitleLock.com right now. Register your address, see if you're already a victim, and then use code RADIO to receive 30 free days of protection. That is code RADIO at HometitleLock.com. Again, that is HometitleLock.com. Now, you would protect your jewelry in a safe. You have your guns in a safe. You have your valuables protected. And you even have your identity protected. Why would you not protect your most valuable asset, your home title? Head on over to HometitleLock.com right now and use code RADIO to receive 30 free days of protection. HometitleLock.com. Alrighty, coming up, the most insane story of the day. Apparently, a man now faces potential charges because he called 911 on himself, trying to spark a racial incident. We'll give you all the details. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. So, this is the craziest story of the day, courtesy of the Washington Examiner. A man faces potential charges after reportedly calling 911 on himself in an apparent attempt to goad police into a racial incident. This event tied up police resources for an extended period of time and unnecessarily placed our officers, our community, and the subject making the false call at risk, said Arlington, Washington Police Chief Jonathan Ventura. He was talking with our friend Jason Rantz up in Seattle. This call highlights the training and professionalism of our officers despite the apparent attempt to goad law enforcement into some type of negative response or altercation. So here's what happened. Someone identifying themselves as Stacy Williams called 911 in Arlington in February to report a black teenager in a tan hoodie, telling dispatch the teenager was holding a handgun with a red bandana tied around it. The caller said the teenager looked, quote, too young to even have a pistol. He only looks 16 or 17 years old. Well, I'm at the bus stop and there's a colored young man and I can see the pistol right there, said the 911 caller. I saw him fidgeting a pistol at the bus stop, kind of scared me. When the police arrived at the scene, they identified Taman Leverett as the suspect due to a detailed description from the 911 caller, but didn't find any weapons after a brief search. Taman pulled up his left pant leg, showed me a Department of Corrections GPS tracking ankle bracelet, an officer wrote. He informed me he was not doing anything wrong, just waiting for the bus to come so he could go to his DOC check-in with his assigned DOC officer. The police officer told Leverett he wanted to understand why someone would call in with concerns he was handling a firearm at the bus stop as described. Leverett told the officers he wasn't sure, but he didn't have a weapon and thanked them for their professionalism. The next day, of course, Leverett told his supervising DOC officer he was a victim of racial profiling. There it is. The DOC officer reported Leverett told him he was stopped and frisked by Everett police for no reason the previous day because of being black. Looking to follow up on the incident, officers called Stacy Williams back, but noticed after getting no answer that the voicemail message sounded exactly like Leverett's voice. I noted the voicemail was set up by a male with a voice that seemed very similar to that of Taman. DOC officer said in his report, I asked dispatch if this phone number had been previously used for any other calls to 911 dispatch. The dispatcher notified me shortly after the phone number had called 911 on 5 separate occasions in December of 2020 for civil calls at an address of 520 Commercial Avenue, Darrington, Washington. Dispatch advised me the only name used to call into 911 on those incidents was Taman L. So, this guy is not only a terrible person, but also a moron. He didn't even use like a payphone or something. He just took his normal cell phone, which he had previously used to call 911 several times using his proper name, and then called 911 to get the officers to come, and then falsely impute racial profiling to them. The officers made contact with Leverett's DOC supervisor, finding out that Leverett's number matched the number that dialed 911. Police say it was the second time that Leverett was involved in a fake 911 call. He made a similar call in December under the name Eric Johnson. I'm with my teenagers right now, the caller said. There's a young African-American male teenager. He has on black and red. I've seen he has a gun on him, and I have my children here. Police searched a male identified as Timon, but determined he was not armed and had not made any threats. Leverett was arrested, could face 2 counts of false reporting, but no charging decisions have been made in the case. Police say Leverett's motive is unclear, but his DOC supervisor noted he has, quote, mentioned that he could see himself in a similar situation as George Floyd. Yep. The police chief said, to have this type of situation come up at a time when we're working hard to bridge that gap and be more transparent and open with our communities, this really works against us in making that happen. We're told that we need to work harder than ever. It's anti-productive. It's unfortunate. It ties up our resources. Okay, this guy should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And if you care about things like racial profiling, if you care about police mistreatment of people, then you should want this guy prosecuted. Because not only did he file a false report, he then lied about what happened in order to create a racial incident that could become the basis for protests and for him becoming a famous name. Yes, all of the interests in our society are very much aligned on behalf of people who tell stories that suggest that the police are racist in unspecified ways. And because they know that the media are never really going to check out the facts, they just go along with those stories until those stories are debunked or fall apart. Already coming up, we'll be joined by Representative Cathy McMorris Rogers. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Joining us on the line is Cathy McMorris Rogers. He's Republican leader of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, the leading voice to protect free speech in Congress, and represents the 5th Congressional District in Washington State. Congresswoman Rogers, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben. Great to be with you.
Let's talk about the censorship that Democrats have been pushing on Capitol Hill. So they had a hearing last week in which they actually talked about, supposed the awfulness of free speech and how there was a lot of extremist speech out there and how do we curb extremist speech. And I remember seeing the news about this and thinking to myself, I was under the grave misimpression, apparently, that there is a constitutional amendment that literally bars Congress from creating laws that infringe upon freedom of speech. So I'm not sure why they need to have a hearing on any of this stuff. And what was that hearing like?
Well, if anybody watched it, first of all, I was just proud our members were united around our defense of free speech. It is a First Amendment right. And we believe in the battle of ideas, the competition of ideas. And what they did was really indefensible. It was another attempt by the Democrats to censor, to control, bringing cancel culture to Washington, D.C. And it is frightening when you have elected officials, elected representatives of the people that are writing a letter to broadcasters, urging them to take down One America Media or Newsmax or Fox News. I mean, they are saying that they know better. They do not trust people to make the best decisions for themselves. They want to coerce, control the information that Americans can watch, that they can access in their homes. They're demanding more censorship, more control. This is the same script that countries like China use to silence the dialogue that they don't agree with.
And we're speaking with Representative Cathy McMorris Rogers. So how dominant is this view inside the Democratic Party? Because it used to be that there were old school liberals who were sort of the old ACLU liberals. They would say that while they disagree with you, they would defend your right to say it to the death. It seems like that is on the wane inside the Democratic Party, that now they're using the rubric of harm to seek to actively ban viewpoints. And they're looking to use whatever means they have at their disposal in order to do so. And this is being cheered on by the media. I think that the great irony of so much of this is that you have members of the press who are now cheering against freedom of the press, so long as they're not the ones being targeted.
Well, it's really un-American. You think about our fundamental rights. This is very dangerous what they're doing, and they're taking the fear they're taking this fear to undermine free speech, so that people have no voice. And you see it played out where people don't feel like they can speak out even in the workplace, that they might lose their job. But, this is the same party that was comfortable endorsing false narratives during the last 4 years. You think about whether it was the New York Post article that, they took down on Hunter Biden, or Governor Cuomo, what was happening in New York, and they were actively hiding it, or the evidence of a Russia collusion in the last election, when Speaker Pelosi said that the election was hijacked, no question, and yet they were willing to defend that those false narratives, and now they're calling for censorship and control.
So what is the real possibility that Democrats actually take action here, or is this just a lot of virtue signaling to their base? And one of the things that they've been looking to do is target social media companies with some sort of regulation in order to coerce them into banning particular types of content. This has been going back years. Senator Dianne Feinstein overtly said to heads of social media that if they didn't remove certain content, then Congress might do the work for them. So what is the real possibility? What actual support is there inside Congress for action that would essentially coerce speech?
Well, what we see is an abuse of power by these elected representatives when they are making these demands of private companies. And it just goes to this larger issue of socialism controlling. You know, it is their desire to control what people hear, what they see on social media, in the news, and ultimately it's their efforts to try to control what people think. Socialism controls, free markets create. It's free markets and free enterprise that creates. And, you know, we've long celebrated as Americans that we trust people to make the best decisions for themselves. We don't try to control them. And people in America are capable of making their best decisions. They'll watch the news, they'll judge the information, and then they'll make their own conclusion. But right now, the Democrats are wanting to control that. We believe that we can, you know, best decide how to take care of ourselves and our families and open up our businesses even during a pandemic.
We're speaking with Representative Cathy McMorris Rogers. She, of course, represents the 5th Congressional District in Washington State. So speaking of the COVID pandemic, Representative Rogers, the Democrats have now rammed through the House with essentially zero Republican support, this massive $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, which is incredibly misnamed. I mean, the fact of the matter is that only about $800 billion of this package have anything to do with direct relief to the American people. A lot of that is superfluous, given the fact that we saw an increase almost 400,000 jobs over the course of the last month. More and more states are reopening. There is demand for people to reopen. We have not really seen shortages in terms of people spending. So what exactly do you think is going to happen in the Senate? Do you think there's going to be enough support in the Senate for Democrats to ram this thing through just along the lines of reconciliation?
Well, reconciliation in and of itself is a signal that the Democrats believe that they can do this alone, right? This is a political tool so that they can ram it through with just 50 votes in the Senate. I know that the Republicans are putting up a fight, but it is true. Just a small percentage of this 1.9 trillion actually goes to anything COVID relief related. We need to open up safely and securely. What is happening with coronavirus, the fact that we have vaccines today, is a tribute to President Trump and the work that was done around Operation Warp Speed. The fact that we have 3 vaccines now in the market in record time, less than a year. And today, 2 million people every day are getting shots in the arm. And yet the Democrats want to move forward with a $1.9 trillion package that's going to add more debt, bailout states like mine in Washington, where Governor Inslee was saying, oh, we're going to have $7 to $8 billion deficit. Today we have increased revenue to the state of Washington, right? But yet these states are going to be bailed out. It's wrong priorities. It's really a payoff to their allies rather than really focusing on what it's going to take to open up our schools, get our kids back in school, open up our businesses, and get our economy booming again.
We'll get to more with Representative Cathy McMorris Rogers in just 1 second. First, are you looking for your next investment? There are 8 reasons to look at the NRIA Real Estate Development Fund. Monthly cash flow payouts up to 10% annualized with bonuses to 21% targets. They strategically chose low-risk, high-demand neighborhoods that people are moving to. Prime new construction is a sector that is short on supply, high on demand. Diversification and safety from stock market risk. They've got a short and a long-term strategy for returns today and returns down the road. Pandemic-hardened, specially designed buildings that are open and airy, and they are in their 15th year as an industry leader. If you've been sitting on the sidelines, or if you want to diversify for safety and cash flow, start your due diligence at nria.net or call 800-800-1414. That is 800-800-1414. An offer of securities is only made by the NRIA Private Placement Memorandum. Read it first. Past performance does not guarantee future results. NRIA is a real estate development firm. Learn more at nria.net. Other bad things that are happening in the House include the recent passage of H.R. 1, which is what they are calling a voting rights bill. But the thing really is a disaster. It enshrines a wide variety of measures that loosen restrictions that would allow for voter fraud, voter irregularity. It gets rid of penalties for people who vote fraudulently under certain circumstances. It essentially mandates ballot harvesting. What do people not understand about H.R. 1, and why isn't it just a general nice broadening of the ability to vote?
Well, I too share those very concerns with H.R. 1. It's misguided and it's misnamed. It's not for the people at all. This is a federal takeover of our elections. And we believe that election integrity is so important. It's going to happen at the state level, not the federal government, and certainly not with public funding of elections or a ban on voter ID. We need security. We need election reform. This is the wrong approach. And the Republicans were united in our opposition to this legislation. We actually had one Democrat join us in the House.
Representative Rogers, so far, I've yet to see a single piece of moderate policy emerge from the new moderate, magical, united Biden administration. The idea when Joe Biden took office is that he was going to be Captain Unity, he was going to bring Americans together. And yet the only pieces of legislation that I've seen pushed and the only executive orders I've seen pushed are incredibly radical. So the contention a lot of us were making during the election, which is that Joe Biden was essentially going to be a Trojan horse for the radical left, that seems to be coming true. It looks like Nancy Pelosi is running the show, not Biden.
I completely agree. Nancy Pelosi is only doubling down. Speaker Pelosi is only doubling down. She was Speaker of the House under Barack Obama. She drove the train then when they passed the Affordable Care Act, when they passed Dodd-Frank, when they passed cap and trade out of the House, even though it didn't pass the Senate. And what I see now is just a doubling down of that. She is moving full speed ahead with her restrictions due to COVID and the fact that we have remote hearings, remote markups. She's only consolidating decision-making and power in the Speaker's office. She's the one directing the chairman. You mark this up. You get it out on this day. It's going to pass the floor, and then it's going over to the Senate. She's just about getting as much of the radical left agenda through the House, through the Senate, and on the president's desk as much as possible. And everything I see is that she doesn't even care about her vulnerable members or her more moderate members. That's just the cost. If they lose their reelection, that's the cost of getting these bills onto the president's desk. And she's only there for 2 more years. She said that she's not going to be, this is her last term, and she's going for broke.
Representative Cathy McMorris Rogers, 5th Congressional District in Washington State and Republican leader of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Really appreciate your time.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
All righty. Coming up, we are going to get into another example of terrible American racism, this time coming from the company Google. I mean, truly, it is incredible how racist Google is for another reason that they're not racist. I mean, I'm just going to give you the spoiler. Google isn't racist, but apparently they are racist. We'll get to that in just one moment. First, let us talk about the fact that if you're a responsible adult, you want to make sure that your family is taken care of. How can you make sure that this happens? Well, you can go over to Policy Genius right now. Policy Genius can help you compare top insurers in one place and save 50% or more when you do. Once you find your best option, the Policy Genius team will set up a new policy for you and answer any questions you have along the way. Here's how you can get started. First, head on over to PolicyGenius.com. In minutes, you can work out how much coverage you need. You can compare quotes and find your best price. Policy Genius makes it easy to compare policies from as little as $15 a month. You might even be eligible to skip that in-person medical exam. Since their licensed agents work for you and not the insurance companies, there's zero hassle. If you hit any speed bumps during the application process, Policy Genius will take care of everything for you, soup to nuts. That kind of service has earned Policy Genius a 5-star rating across thousands of reviews on Trustpilot and Google. The best part? All the benefits of Policy Genius, the comparison tool, the handling of paperwork, the unbiased advice, they are totally free to use. So while you are tidying up around the house this spring, why not get your life insurance organized as well? You could save 50% or more by comparing quotes. Feel good knowing if something happens, your loved ones will be taken care of. Go to PolicyGenius.com right now to get started. Alrighty, coming up. Apparently, Google is racist because, like, everything is racist. Wait until you hear why. So stupid. Our culture's so stupid. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. So, Google's racist. Congratulations. Now, you might be saying to yourself, wait, Google? You mean that super progressive kind of radical lefty company, the one that controls huge amounts of information flow. They're racist. Yep. According to the Washington Post, they are. Why? Because they don't have enough black engineers. Now, maybe you're saying to yourself, well, maybe the reason they don't have enough black engineers is because there aren't enough black engineers graduating from top schools. Yes, that would be the logical take, would it not? But don't worry. Don't worry. They're racist because they're not accepting less qualified black engineers rather than more qualified Asian and white people. This is what makes them racist. In fact, according to the Washington Post, quote, Google's approach to historically black schools helps explain why there are few black engineers in big tech. According to Natasha Tiku, for years, Google's recruiting department used a college ranking system to set budgets and priorities for hiring new engineers. Some schools, such as Stanford and MIT, were predictably in the elite category, while state schools or institutions that churn out thousands of engineering grads annually, like Georgia Tech, were assigned to Tier 1 or Tier 2. But one category of higher education was missing from Google's ranking system, according to several current and former Google employees involved in recruitment, despite the company's pledges to promote racial diversity. Historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs. That framework meant those schools were at a lower priority for hiring, even though Google had said in 2014 it wanted to partner with HBCUs as a way to recruit more minority talent. In lieu of a tier, Google's university programs recruiting division, responsible for forging partnerships with universities, labeled these colleges long-tail schools, in reference to the fact it could take a long time before these universities would produce a large number of graduates qualified to work at Google, according to the Google employees. So in other words, they looked at the HBCUs. They said they're not producing enough engineering students who are of quality that compare with like Georgia Tech, which is a very good engineering school, and certainly not MIT or Stanford. And this makes them racist. Former recruiter April Christina Curley, who helped lead Google's outreach to HBCUs, said, quote, Google allocated resources so disparagingly because of how they tiered and thought of our schools. She was fired in September, she says, largely as a result of continually raising concerns about bias against HBCU students. Google for years has been celebrated as trying to fix Silicon Valley's race gap, with praise highlighting the company's efforts to build a relationship with historically black colleges and universities. But while Google had a head start, it undervalued and underinvested in black engineering students at HBCUs, according to interviews with Curley and 7 current and former Google workers, HBCU graduates, former faculty members, emails, planning documents, and performance reviews. Now critics are challenging Google to address its treatment of HBCU students and to re-examine assumptions about the pipeline for black technical talent that were replicated across the industry as competitors copied Google's approach. So, again, it's really bad because they spend tons and tons of money on HBCUs. Right? They actually give a lot of money to HBCUs. But that's not good enough. Because now, the idea is that they are supposed to hire people from HBCUs, even if those people are less qualified than people who go to Georgia Tech, or go to Stanford, or go to MIT. Apparently, Google had modernized the computer science curricula at a wide variety of HBCUs, and they'd helped better prepare students for working in Silicon Valley. But the internships that they offered did not compare to the job offers. Google is showboating in the form of donations or announcing new programs rather than reassessing its approach, says Nicole Tinson, Chief Executive Officer of HBCU 2020, a network for seeking jobs and internships. In December, Tinson canceled HBCU's 2020 partnership with Google, including several planned 2021 mock interview events after Curley's tweets. Silicon Valley has been increasing its number of black engineers, but there aren't tons of them. Apple apparently has only about 6% of its engineers were black in 2018. 6% of its engineers were black in 2014. Facebook, only 1% of its engineers were black in 2014, only 2% today. Google, 2 and 2. Microsoft, 2 and 4, Twitter, 1 and 5. So very few of these companies have actively increased the number of black engineers in their programs. Now, do you think that's because these companies are desperate not to hire black engineers? Or do you think maybe it's because there are not enough black engineering students? By the way, that is not because of racism. That is because of self-selection of majors. This is a big problem across colleges and universities. We've talked about it in the past. People say that black college graduates earn less on average than white college graduates. Yes, because they major in different things. Black college graduates tend to major in lower earning majors. That seems to have an impact on earning potential. By the way, if you want to talk about radically disproportionate share of engineers, 53% of all Facebook engineers in 2020 are, wait for it, Asian. 53%. Okay, the Asian population of the United States as a percentage is something like 5.6%. 5.6%. And Asians represent 53% of all of the engineers at Facebook. They represent 48% of all of the engineers at Google. They represent 35% of all the engineers at Apple. So, maybe it has nothing to do with race and a lot to do with who is taking what major. But no, it's got to be that Google is racist, because forever and always, if there is a disproportionate impact of a policy on a particular population, it has to be because the policy is bad. Speaking of which, MSNBC host Joy Reid, who, like everybody over at MSNBC, continues to fail up, she tweeted today, quote, "I will say it again. People on the right would trade all the tax cuts for the ability to openly say the N-word like in the good old days." What now? This is the view, by the way, of folks on the authoritarian woke left. They truly believe that you are a racist, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter that you've never said the N-word and don't like it when other people say the N-word. No matter if it has never occurred to you that the N-word would be a good thing to say. You would trade tax cuts for saying the N-word anytime, because that's who you are deep down, which is, of course, why we ought to regulate you. Reid's response was made to a thread of tweets from MSNBC contributor Jason Johnson and former New York Times opinion editor Barry Weiss. Weiss's tweet sparked the conversation because she slammed the illiberal left for sounding like a totalitarian society. Johnson's response to Barry Weiss appeared to claim she was defending the private use of racial slurs when she discussed how a student at a top law school felt the need to self-censor comments. Johnson tweeted, "Yes, because code switching, mask wearing, and all the other hoops that black people have to go through to appease enough of the majority to even get into law school isn't the issue, but censoring yourself from saying the N-word among friends is." But that's not what Barry was arguing in favor of course. That's not what Barry was saying. She was saying that people are self-censoring on a regular basis because if you even say things like, there should be free speech in America, this is considered racist now. Naturally, Joy Reid's response is everybody is a racist who doesn't agree with me. This was just the same day that she said on her show, by the way, that states like Texas and Mississippi only want black people to get vaccines because white people want black people to, quote, get their behinds into the factory and make me my steaks. So it's not that we're denying black and brown people the vaccines anymore, which was the original case for American racism. Now is that black and brown people are getting too many vaccines because if they get too many vaccines, the white people need them to work. Amazing. When you search for racism behind every possible tree, then you come up with racism behind every possible tree. And this is what people are doing right now. And it is not making the country better in any way. Do you feel like the country's better in any way? Since our wonderful racial reckoning over the summer, which resulted in $2 billion in property damage, do you feel like the country has gotten more or less obsessed with the issue of race? Do you think that the country has gotten more or less concerned over polarization on the basis of race? Do you think racial politics have gotten better or worse in America since the great racial awakening of 2020? I'm not sensing that things are getting better anytime soon. Alrighty, we'll be back here next week as Democrats prepare to blow out the value of the dollar. We'll talk about that next week. This is The Ben Shapiro Show.